This is your tech news briefing for Tuesday, January 24th. I'm Zoe Thomas for the Wall Street Journal. On Monday, Microsoft announced a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar investment in OpenAI, the maker of the Chat GPT and Dall-E applications. The two companies already had a partnership, and last week Microsoft's CEO Satya Nadella said his company plans to incorporate OpenAI software into a range of its own products, from Microsoft Designer to the search engine Bing. That is seen as a potential threat to Google, which has dominated the search market for over a decade. So how could the use of AI change online search as we know it? And what does this mean for the market's players? Joining me to discuss how this rivalry could play out is our Heard on the Street columnist, Dan Gallagher. Hi, Dan. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Dan, I want to talk about Microsoft's investment, but first, there's been a lot of talk about how AI and Chat GPT in particular is going to upend search as we know it. Why do observers think there's this potential there?
Well, I think because, one, it's such a new thing. When people started testing this, when it launched in very late November, it was cool. It was different. You know, you type in any kind of question, it gives you a very conversational answer. And so I think Google was the immediate comparison, because often when we're trying to find something on the internet or find something out, we're Googling something. Hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? And so having this tool that spit back stuff that was like a lot more digestible, conversational, seemed a threat to that. It made the whole Google search seem old by comparison. This is like an existential threat to them, was a kind of fast interpretation, I think.
So Microsoft already had partnerships with OpenAI. Can you tell us about what their existing relationships were and now what this new investment is?
Well, I think the new investment essentially just deepens what they had. And I read it as something that Microsoft hasn't bought the company outright, but has got, you might say, major dibs on the technology that OpenAI has developed. But I think what this does is, one, it really solidifies OpenAI's technology onto Microsoft's cloud infrastructure, Azure. And that's a big deal for Microsoft because they want those workloads and want Azure to be front and center for AI. And it gives Microsoft these options. I mean, what Satya Nadella said at Davos last week is that they want to embed this technology not just in Microsoft's web search. They have a competing product to Google, but they want to embed it across all their products. So theoretically, Word and Excel and all these things Microsoft has.
So then what does that tell us about the way Microsoft in particular is viewing the potential of this AI?
Well, they obviously view it as like expansive for everything they have, not just, maybe we can take some share from Google in search. I think they see it as this can revolutionize all of our products, all of our services if we do it right.
So we know how Microsoft is reacting. How is Google reacting? I don't know if we know about how it's reacting to this investment, but how is it reacting to the, explosion of interest in Chat GPT and OpenAI?
Well, I think they're worried about it. In fairness, Google has not been dead on AI, or they've invested a lot of money in AI on their own over the years, built it into their data centers. They've really, for years, built themselves as an AI-first company. But I think when Chat GPT came out and all of a sudden there was this interest in it, reportedly there were Google inside executives were calling it a code red. We haven't seen anything announced by the company like any major transaction or change they're doing. But I think definitely they're paying close attention.
But to go back to what we were talking about before, I mean, when you Google something, when you search it, you don't always put in the same kind of questions that people have been putting into Chat GPT. I'm not Googling, can you write me an essay on Dickens, which some people have been putting into Chat GPT. So is it really an existential threat to what Google does and to its business model at the moment?
I think that existential threat was probably overestimated, especially in the near term, because you're right. There's a janky term called monetizable search. That, Google makes most of its money through search ads, but not every search, especially not every query put in Chat GPT, really works that way. If you ask Chat GPT hey, can you explain for me string theory? It'll give you this very conversational answer, but that's not a revenue generating answer. And the other problem with it is it gives you a single answer. And, when you search in Google, you get all these options, you know where it's coming from. You can kind of evaluate, hey, is this good information? Maybe not so good. Chat GPT has already been shown that sometimes the information it's spitting out is not accurate, and you can't really tell where it's coming from.
So it's maybe not as obvious a revenue generator. What does that mean for kind of cost overall and for the cost of adding these AI tools into existing products? What's Microsoft going to face when it does that?
It's significant because just the computing power to run a Chat GPT search versus a Google search has been estimated to be like 7 times as much. And that's just because under the hood of this stuff is these data centers with these like really expensive chips and memory that have to do this, and the power consumption that comes from that. So I think as Microsoft embeds more of this into its products and more across its network, it'll face that. Google's going to face it too because they're clearly going to seek to keep up with Microsoft. So I think as both companies are kind of in a bit of an arms race in this area, they're going to see their costs go up.
What does that mean for the cost per query evaluation that search engines have to make when they're building their products?
Well, when a company like Google is developing its search engine and refining it, clearly their first priority is let's make this good information that gets people to what they want to do, and that means they're going to keep coming back and using it. So if the world moves more to users wanting AI in their results, Google's going to have to keep up, Microsoft's going to keep up. And that'll raise their cost of it. And the timing of this right now, and the reason this is kind of a relevant point, is that we're seeing these companies actually worried about their costs overall.
All right, that's our Heard on the Street columnist, Dan Gallagher. Dan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And that's it for today's Tech News Briefing. For more tech stories, head over to our website, WSJ.com. I'm Zoe Thomas for the Wall Street Journal. Thanks for listening.